welcome to the Society with Fatma Shaheen at PTV World. The World Day of Remembrance for Road Traffic Victims takes place on the third Sunday in November every year. Now, this is a day that we understand on which we not only come together to acknowledge, but it is also a day on which we remember road accident survivors and their respective families. Keeping in mind the general theme of this very day, and of course, in an attempt to raise community awareness, today on our show we'll be talking about road safety awareness per se. We'll be talking about the various laws and of course the policies which actually regulate traffic laws and of course related violations. We'll also be talking about the need to practically implement the same. We'll be talking about the societal attitudes which we all have when it comes to addressing such incidents. We'll be talking about the psychological impact that of course such accidents do have on those who actually are a victim of the same. And last but not the least, we'll also try and of course talk about the prevention mechanisms, because when we talk about addressing road safety, what is very important to remember is the fact that it is extremely important to have a preventive and of course by that virtue a preemptive approach rather than having a merely reactionary one. So this and much more to follow on today's show, that too with an extremely pertinent panel. Let me introduce you to my today's panel. My first panelist for the show today is Sana Khurshid, who's a road accident survivor. She's also a disability rights advocate alongside being a road safety ambassador for an organization. Assalamu alaikum Sana, and welcome to the show.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. Alongside her, I have Dr. Syed Asad Shah, who is a consultant neurosurgeon. Assalamu alaikum sir, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
And my third panelist for the show today is Dr. Alia Aftab, who is a psychologist alongside being a social worker. Assalamu alaikum Alia, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. Well, to get the conversation started with you, Sana, we understand the fact that you had this accident in the year 2002 on the Lahore to Islamabad motorway. So if we take you back in time, could you tell us that, how exactly did the accident happen? And now when you look back at it, retrospectively, do you feel that, there could have been some factors which could possibly have avoided the same?
We believe like what is going to happen is going to happen. But I think in some situations there are some precautionary measures which we can take to maybe prevent the extent of the injury or extent of the consequences that we do actually suffer from. Like I said, I was on the way to Islamabad with my whole family and another family. We were, and near Pindi Bhatia, the tire of our car burst. So now ideally if the driver had known his job and if he had known the rules and regulations, he would have known not to apply the brakes. But apparently he did not know. I mean, he was a good driver per se, but apparently he wasn't, because he wasn't aware of the basic rules. So he applied the brakes and the car toppled over a couple of times, and I suffered a spinal injury at the cervical level in this accident, and not only that, I lost an elder sister in this accident as well. So, when you talk about road safety, for me to state that it is very important is an understatement.
Of course.
I am a consequence of a road traffic accident, and I know what kind of devastating damage that it does, not to only one individual but to the whole family. So if one person is involved in an accident, it affects the whole family. The whole family suffers from that tragedy.
Right, Sana, your point is noted. On which, sir, I'll come to you. I think you must also, of course, talk about this from a medical viewpoint. Now, I understand the fact that, as, of course, a neurosurgeon, you must be coming across a lot of people who actually do suffer from such accidents. So can you tell us that when it comes to, of course, classifying the scale, or for that matter, the severity of the head injuries, what categories do they fall in?
Patients come to us with mild, moderate and severe head injuries. In mild head injury, the symptoms are very mild, like headache, vomiting and nausea and dizziness. And in the moderate head injury, the patients are suffering from dizziness, fits, ENT bleed, and some of also suffering from loss of consciousness. And in severe head injury patients, mostly people are in coma. And this is very critical stage, and total about 60 to 70,000 critical injuries we receive annually in our hospital, and most of them are due to bike accidents. Major are the bike accident, and others are like car accidents,
even pedestrian accidents,
yes,
for that
also
matter, because I think that is,
accidents.
of course, then again one area which is not that regulated,
Yes,
unfortunately.
exactly.
But when we talk about, people suffering from road injuries, I was going over this, medical research which actually suggested the fact that, it's difficult for doctors like you to instantaneously make that diagnosis, because more often than not, these injuries are of a nature which you can't very clearly pinpoint towards, like the symptoms, they take some time to show. So how then you make a diagnosis? Because I think this is something very important. If you don't make a diagnosis, then of course it could be somebody who could, actually suffer because of that.
Exactly. The first hour after the injury is very important, and we called it a golden hour. Because if the patient get investigated in this first hour, then it will give chances of survival is more in them. And symptoms mostly appear after first hour to 48 hours. But most of the patients ignore them and they don't come to hospitals and they go to homes. And then whenever the symptoms appear, then they rush to hospitals. Till then the golden hour has been passed and their survival chances are very less.
Right. So as a precautionary measure for all those people who are watching the show, you would advise that, if anybody, God forbid, does have a road accident, I think the ideal thing should be that they should, of course, get a proper CT scan done. Madam, coming towards you, I think we often ignore the psychological and, of course, the emotional trauma that a lot of people who undergo such road traffic accidents, they actually, have to face. So when we talk about, people actually suffering from, various kind of disorders, of which I believe the PTSD is the most common one, basically. So how do you in your own place identify? Because again, this is a very tricky area, because a lot of times we see that people might not have suffered physical injuries, but at the same time, they do suffer from PTSD. So how do you make that diagnosis?
First, let me tell what PTSD stands for, because people might not know. PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. The stress doesn't take place at the same time. It takes place after about a month, you can say. The symptoms are there. Now, what are the common symptoms of PTSD? Anxiety, fear. Fear means panic situation. It can be a phobia even. It can be anger. It can be frustration. It can be just a nightmare, insomnia, recurring thoughts, because these are very common. These are very common. Then guilt. Then negative thinking that, oh my God, this is going to happen again. What if this, what if that? So what if is also there. And when it will come, most of the people don't recognize. Because when they are going through this, they say the family, because as you said, Padma, I would agree with you that the whole family suffers.
Right, which is why I raised this question, madam, because a lot of times I feel that, something which earlier Sana also pinpointed, that the focus of the entire discussion is only on the person who's actually been involved. That person can't, of course, operate in isolation. That person has to go back to their family. So the family, whether they were physically part of that accident or not, it is, of course, automatically impacted too. So in the case of family, when we talk about, the family members, if somebody hasn't witnessed, the accident per se, can they kind of take an influence directly from somebody who has?
Yes, why not? Because you see what happens, recurring thoughts, nightmares. You get up screaming and shouting, all sweating. So obviously, you need some help. You need some reassurance. You need to talk. We say catharsis. You need to talk about it when you're feeling, because if it is going to stay inside, it is going to give you problems. Your whole social life is affected. If you have to travel somewhere, then obviously that thought is there at the back of the mind. Is going to cause trouble. And if you're traveling with family, it's going to cause the whole family trouble. They are not going to carry on the same way as they used to earlier.
Even, madam, I read also bystander anxiety. That is something that is also, I think, often ignored in our conversations. I think you would also want to comment on this as well, because this is, I think, a general thing from your own experience, and otherwise when we see such accidents happening, a lot of bystanders, even they are traumatized.
Exactly. I mean, it's not only the person who's injured that is affected, it's everybody who was present at that scene, the person who was driving the car, even if he didn't get affected, but having caused somebody else an injury, I think that guilt sort of stays with you as well. I hope it does, though. I mean, this feels some kind of remorse, and so that's why always, when we stress about road safety, it's not just enough that you are careful. You need to be careful and anticipate the other person, the other driver's movements as well. Because it's not only, if you can't just be confident that, oh, I'm following the rules and I'm following the regulations. No, but you need to anticipate the other driver's moves as well to keep safe.
You need to be on a defensive mode, especially when you're driving around in Pakistan. So when we talk about, of course, road safety generally, and of course the repercussions which do follow after an accident, was PTSD something that you experienced?
I mean, just listening to her right now, I was just thinking back, and I was like, I suffered from the worst insomnia after my accident, because the moment I used to close my eyes, the whole episode used to play in my mind like a film. And I was afraid to close my eyes, and for the longest I was at a really, a chronic insomniac. I couldn't sleep. And I think that was me, that was PTSD, but I was never treated, because one therapist that my parents called for me, the first thing that he said was that, okay, Sana, think back what happened, and I told him, okay, this accident now you're going to pretend that it never happened.
God.
And I was like, how can I pretend? And when I look at myself, how can I deny that it didn't happen? So I think I missed out on that chance to process it and to actually treat.
But then how did you overcome it? Because if you don't accept that there's something wrong with you, that to the patient, then how can you actually actively work towards it?
It took me the longest time to get to the mental space that I am in. And my family has a big role to play in that. But initially after my accident, I was a mess. Those what ifs and why me, and the whole, I was a victim, I was a martyr in my own mind. I mean, after my accident, I went to the UK for rehabilitation and did a very extensive rehabilitation course. But when I came back, I was back to square one. I refused to get out of bed, because mentally I was not ready to accept it.
And I think this is something that she's very validly pointed out. Dr. Sahib, I think you would want to comment on this further, that when we talk about the trauma, I've seen that, in cases, whatever the severity might be, even people who witnessed it, it's something which stays with them even for a lifetime, for years to come, for months to come. So then I think by that virtue, the therapy, the treatments that they seek, those must be very long, those must be very tedious, and of course expensive too.
You see, therapy is a very long process. It's not something that 2 or 3 sessions would help. But what we can do to these types of people, I mean patients or whatever you like to call them, that we can teach them some self-coping techniques to cut it short, that it's not so expensive even, and they can manage it on its own. You see, I'm not going to say forget about it, because it stays there at the back of the mind. But the intensity has to be reduced.
But coming to you, sir, I think a very important point which we must of course talk about in today's conversation is the fact that, when we talk about getting people the right access and of course the quick access to hospital care, a lot of times we, often overlook the importance of pre-hospital care, because if you can't get to the hospital in time, then of course the consequences can be disastrous for you at the end of the day. So when we demarcate both these, kind of cares, be it within the hospital or for that matter, the pre-hospital care, what are the things that people need to look out for?
Well, first of all, there should be a very quick, fast ambulance service should be provided by the government, and there should be a specialized trained staff present in the ambulance, and paramedics staff should be trained, and they have given training like advanced life supporting techniques. They should be learned, and first of all, there should be a proper care transportation system provided to the patients, because most of the patients get worse while transporting to the hospitals, and there are very traffic jam problems, and people don't give way to the ambulance, and many patients come to us after 6 or 8 hours, and patients are almost in critical condition, so we can't do further to save them, and many lives have been lost due to the transportation system is not good.
Sir, I think you would want to add something to this.
When my accident happened, there were no rescue services at that time, and I was yanked and pulled out, and I was made to walk, which obviously I was not capable of doing. And I remember they put me, the ambulance hadn't reached, and they made me lie down on the road, and then this rickety old ambulance came, and we went to a very small hospital. I don't even remember where it was, and the duty doctor over there, I still remember, I was like going in and out of consciousness. But I remember the doctor saying that this is beyond me, I can't deal with this injury, you need to take her to Lahore. And then they took me to Lahore. So I feel, I mean, we've got a very good rescue service right now, and I feel very good about it, and I feel I wish it had been there at my time as well.
Right, Sana, your point is noted, on which I'll come to you, madam. I think we must, of course, in this context, talk about this issue, which is something which unfortunately emancipates, or for that matter, which affects the vulnerable people more. And we understand this because when we see that poor people, they are victims of road traffic accidents. Of course, nobody can deny the fact that, both the social and of course the economic effects on them are of course more adverse. They are more serious compared to somebody who's comparatively more affluent. So in this regard, how then do you feel as a society can we mitigate such effects on those who are more vulnerable?
We think that we need to give them training, make it a part of our curriculum. Like, I'm really very happy over it that you have done a program on it. Look at the social media, look at telecom media. I mean, social media is in right now. If we talk about it, because repetition is a must. And as Sana told about mindset, we need to be positive. We need to show the positive side and spread awareness about it with children, with families. You can educate, you can just talk about it in TV programs, on radios and stuff. And in schools, invite people in schools to talk about it. The more you talk about it and the more awareness you spread, and you tell people that, okay, God forbid if something happens, like as Sana said, and I think I agree with it, that we also need to be responsible. We are responsible citizens of a state. So we need to take responsibility and be mature. Don't encourage anyone to behave in a bad way or to do one-wheeling or cross the road without looking at the red light. So basically
then it's a combination of not one, rather several things. And I'll come to you. I think we must also of course talk about this in of course an international context. We generally do see that the numbers and the cases of such incidents arising in the developing countries, that is definitely way more than what it is in the developed world. So if you were to make a comparison, why do you feel this is the case? Is this because there is a lack of implementation of traffic laws and regulations in the developing countries as opposed to the developed world, or do you feel at the end of the day it's a difference in the way such incidents, such traffic violations are just looked at by the society at large?
I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. Number one being the lack of implementation and enforcement mechanisms. We need very strict enforcement mechanisms, not just for road safety. I think for every law and every regulation and every rule there is out there, we lack in basic enforcement mechanisms. And I think another reason for having a lot of road traffic accidents, why the frequency is higher in our country, is because we have this mindset of, oh, rules are meant to be broken. Somehow in young people it's cool to break the rules. I mean, I used to wear a seat belt and a lot of times I was made fun of. So, we need that mindset transformation very badly, and we need to, as individuals recognize the responsibility that we have to keep our roads safe, to keep the people around us safe. Because, you need to remember one thing. It's just not enough that you are on the road and you try to keep yourself safe. Your actions need to save others from getting into an accident as well. And the sooner we realize that, the better it will be for everybody. Because when you're on the road, you cannot afford to be selfish and just think of yourself. If you are in a car and the other person is in a motorbike, if God forbid, if you do get into an accident, the consequence for that bike rider are going to be devastating.
This is why I pose this question to Alia. At the end of the day, I think nobody is safe until unless everybody else is safe. Doctor, coming towards you, I think we must also of course talk about this from the viewpoint of people actually being able to access the healthcare system. And I think this is something which you earlier mentioned as well, that when we talk about people's access to the healthcare system, it has to be facilitated at the end of the day. A lot of people can actually afford undergoing expensive treatments. So as a doctor, what proposals would you make so as to expedite the entire process?
Well, roadside accident patients are major burden on the economy of developing countries like ours, and it took about more than 1 lakh rupees per day for their expenses to treat them in ICU, in public hospital or in any private hospital. And in government sector hospitals, government have given very good facilities for patients, and ICU care has been provided, but patient burden is too much. And for one ventilator, 6 patients are fighting for one ventilator. And we need a lot of ventilators in our setup, and there should be trauma centers in every tehsil and headquarters and district levels. And proper emergency and accident specialists should be appointed in each tehsil and district levels so that patients can be treated well.
Right. Sir, rehabilitation is something that you earlier spoke about. I would want you to, basically deliberate on that further. Now, I understand that you went to UK basically to get, rehabilitation. Why not Pakistan? Because you did get some of your treatments here in Pakistan before you ended up going to UK.
UK was not a choice that we made willingly. It was the only option available for me at that point. Because when I had my accident, I mean, I had access to the best healthcare and everything because my parents are doctors, I come from a medical background. I mean, even then, there was so much lacking in our health system. There was no specialized spinal care unit at that time. Nobody knew how to treat a spinal cord injury patient. I remember I got a procedure done and they put a tube inside me and they didn't know how to take that tube out because apparently they had never had a person survive for that long where they had to take that tube out. So we went to UK, and over there, I mean, my eyes opened to a whole new world. I mean, sitting in Pakistan, I thought my life was over. I was going to be on the bed forever. But over there, when I saw people who had much severe injuries than me, and they were living a very independent life, so I was amazed. And I think for me and my family, that was like a breakthrough. Because at that point, we realized, okay, there does exist a life after a spinal cord injury.
Of course.
So I wish there had been specialized centers at that time.
You're talking about 2002.
2002.
It's 2022 now.
Right now. But fortunately, and it's good news that there are special spinal cord injury centers, and I've visited that. I've been their ambassador as well, and the kind of services that they are providing is at par with what I had when I went to in England. So I think, I mean, of course, there's a lot that needs to be done. There's a lot that needs to be worked out, but I think we have started. We have
made progress.
Yes, we have made
it
progress.
Has been slow, but it has been.
It has been, and if you know, it's always good to keep a positive mindset. And I think, you know, when one institute has made a spinal cord center, I'm sure a lot of other places will follow suit.
I think in this regard, we must also, of course, talk about the fact that when we talk about rehabilitation, you know, or for that matter, basically treating that person, getting them back into the society that way, it is a long process. It's not something which is black and white. It's not simple and linear as it may sound at the end of the day. So when you treat such patients, I understand that, you know, it must be a very complex process, you know, using which you get them out of the trauma and then actually help them fit back into the life that they had before that accident actually occurred. So what are the therapies that you use? What are the mechanisms which are employed in this regard? And why is it so important to also treat the family of the road accident survivor here?
The thing is, in order to get back to life, it's very important for them to remove that mental block that they have created. I mean, it's something very natural that has been created. So what we do is we use cognitive behavior therapy because it's all about cognition, thinking. We have to change the thinking pattern because it becomes really, really negative. So there are loads of technique over there. Then there are loads of positive thinking techniques. There's a very good therapy which is rational emotive therapy. And there's a very simple technique. And you can do it about 10 times a day, 5 times a day, even 20 times a day.
Right. And what is therapy like? Like what do you have to do with the
like
therapy?
We tell you that, okay, whenever you think of that catastrophic thought, because it's a catastrophic thought, you don't have to bring it. It is already there in you. And so we tell you to close your eyes, take a deep breath, hold your breath, hold that thought, make it in the form of picture, because imagine emotions are there. As we were talking about EQ, emotional quotient we talk about.
Right.
There's anger, there's fear, so there's like loads of things. So we tell you, okay, make it a picture with your feelings, with colors, with everything. Make it a like still picture. Put fire on all the 4 corners of the picture. If it's difficult for you to imagine it in the form of a picture, imagine it as a red light. Because red is a sign for danger. And then put fire on all the 4 corners of the picture. And then imagine that it's burning, and it's burning from the mind, from the subconscious, and then exhale. Sometimes you can imagine the mind is like a sky, thick dark clouds, and it starts to pour down. And these are your negative thoughts.
Right.
So this is a very simple technique that anybody can do or have. Then we also tell you to put a rubber band on your wrist. They are negative, stretch it and leave it. Because you've got to be conscious.
Right.
What happens is at the back of the mind and automatically we become used to it.
Right.
And then the whole family suffers because then you won't be able to sleep properly at night. When you get up, you will not get up fresh.
Right, Alia, your point is noted. Sir, coming to you, I think a very interesting question which I would like to put to you, since you are the only male panelist today on the show, is that in our society, I believe that, you know, there is this general mindset that, you know, whenever a road accident happens, and, you know, there would be a lot of people who would very conveniently say that, you know, if this has happened, then this must be a woman who's out on the road. It must be a woman who must be basically driving the car. So why do we have these preconceived notions about, you know, women not being, you know, such apt drivers?
This is absolutely wrong, and I have seen many female drivers, and they are very good drivers.
Yeah.
And I am saying that they obey rules and regulation more than males. And I don't think so that the females are the main cause of accidents.
They might not be the main cause, but Sana, more often than not, they are blamed. You would agree with me on this.
Definitely. I mean, you ask our driver if anything goes wrong on the road. Oh, a lady must be driving the car. So
I don't know why we are innately, we have this inculcated in our minds that, if something goes wrong on the road, it must be one way or the other, basically a woman. But I then also have statistics to suggest the fact that, worldwide, not only in Pakistan, 73% males, more particularly males within the age bracket of 15 to 29 years, they are, more vulnerable to actually falling victim to road accidents. So, of course, when we put the blame on women, I think there's another narrative which we must see by virtue of facts and figures too. Coming towards you, Sana, but before we conclude today's show, I think a very important question which then arises in this regard is that, of course, we understand the fact that, you've come a long way after this accident actually happened. And, this accident, as we see, it gave you that strength to actually lobby for the rights of those who have been differently able, more particularly because of, the road accidents that they did suffer. But in this regard, what message would you want to give to all the people out there that, why is it so important, why is it so pivotal that people like yourself, you actually talk about, their rights, you actually talk about empowering others like yourself, because this is something which will truly give them strength at the end of the day.
Padma, obviously, like I said before, road safety is something that I cannot state enough, because I'm a consequence of a road safety accident. So when this organization approached me, I don't think I even thought twice about it. I was like, yes, I am so on board, because I understand their ethos, and I agree with them, because together we aim to change mindsets and transform mindsets, and we need to realize that road safety, at the end of the day, it's not a choice. It's not an option. It saves lives, and it's the law. You cannot just ignore it. So, I mean, I'm working with that organization, and everybody knows that you need to stay within the traffic limit. You need to follow the lanes. You cannot overtake unnecessarily. You cannot overload. So recently I addressed 100 plus transporters and truck drivers in my capacity.
Which is amazing.
In my capacity as that organization's road safety ambassador. And of course they know all these rules. And I was telling them that, of course, I know you guys are much better drivers than me, and you know more rules than me. But I need to just tell you that, when you're driving a big vehicle, you cannot afford to be careless for even 1 second. But it's a second is all that takes to just turn your life or the other person's life around. So, and when coming from me, because I'm a consequence, I have suffered from a road traffic accident. It has completely changed my life and my family's life. So, I need to I stress and I need to tell people, like, listen, this is what happens when you get careless.
Right.
So we need to be very vigilant when we are on the road. And like I said before, it's not just enough that you are following the rules. You need to anticipate the actions of other drivers on the road.
I think you need to be on the defensive mode all the time, not only watching out for yourself, but of course for watching out for the safety of others too on that note. Right, Sana, your point is noted. On which, Dr. I'll come to you. So to wrap up today's conversation, what would your proposals be, especially when it comes to, preventing road accidents? Because I think this is something on which we all unanimously agree that at the end of the day, prevention is better than cure. And when we, actually are serious about, curbing such accidents in the society per se, it is extremely important that we have, a preemptive approach as opposed to a merely reactionary one.
First of all, there should be a helmet law should be implemented, and every bike manufacturing company should give helmet free of cost to their customers, and there should be also a side mirrors installed in the bikes, because many accidents occur due to the bikers don't see behind or in left or right of them. And also there should be a seat belt law should be implemented, and the airbags should be installed in every car that are manufactured in Pakistan. 80% cars in Pakistan don't have airbags in them. And proper examination and medical fitness of drivers should be done. And before getting lessons, there should be a 1 month class for each and every drivers, where they should learn the laws of traffic and rules and regulations. and also there should be a road safety department established in province of Punjab, because many roads in Punjab are broken or teared down.
Right. The infrastructure is something that we need to work on, basically.
Due to our monsoon rains, roads are not well in our country, and they are the major source of accidents.
Right.
And also there should be a horizontal reflections and vertical reflections, pedestrian walkway, and there should be a separate lanes for motorcycle vehicles and trucks, and for bicycles and pedestrian in streets.
Right, sir, your point is noted. Alia, coming towards you, and before we wrap up today's show, what would your message be to all the people out there? I think in this regard, it's extremely important that we talk about, of course, the need for mobilizing the community, the need for, of course, making the community aware and sensitized about road safety per se. So what would your suggestions be in this regard, that if we want to make the average Pakistani out there aware about, the various laws, the various policies, and of course the regulations that we do have about, traffic related violations, what would be the most effective mechanism to do so?
I need to say we need to have a check and balance. That's very important, because what happens sometimes we don't even have our vehicles checked because they are old vehicles. We don't check the brakes, we don't check the engine oil, we don't have them serviced, and they don't work as same. And sometimes they are so old, we don't have insurance plans. When the accident takes place, we keep on fighting. We forget about the damage that has been done.
Right.
See, so we need to be patient, we need to take responsibility, we need to be mature, and we need to have check and balances, because obviously, you see, our transport system now, thanks to the government, the buses are really good. Look at the metro. But they need to be advanced, and they need to be serviced, they need to be checked. So please have a check and balance, I would say, and take responsibility, because at the end of the day, we are responsible for our own acts, and the damage that is going to be done is going to change our lives.
Of course.
And parents also need to be a little strict with their children, because loads of people have these bikes and they do one-wheeling, which is not. And the government has done on
those who don't have, one-wheelers, I think those who are actually driving the two-wheelers, the rickshaws, or for that matter, even cars. I've seen so many young boys, they are driving it in such a hasty manner, like there is no tomorrow for them at the end of the day, not thinking what the consequences might be for anybody who's even walking on the road. On which note, I would like to conclude today's show. Thank you so much, Sana. Thank you so much, Dr. Saab, and thank you so much, Alia, for being here with us today. Well, to conclude today's show, we generally spoke about road safety as it does exist in Pakistan. We also spoke about, the various laws that we do have in place so as to regulate it. We spoke about the very pressing need to implement the same. And of course, in this regard, what becomes very important, what becomes very pertinent is our societal attitudes, which unfortunately at one level or the other do not take road safety very seriously. In this regard, we need to teach everybody out there who is actually using public spaces to ensure that they are driving safely, because unless everybody is safe, nobody can practically be safe. On that note, signing off for today. Until next time, take care and Allah Hafiz.
You are watching PTV World.